Now it's time for another Board Game Brawl preview with Nick Minahan, sponsored by BoardGameBliss.com.
Hey now, my name is Nick, this is Board Game Brawl, and today we're going to be taking a look at a game that is currently seeking funding on Kickstarter. That game is called Hex, and it's from Machow Designs. Now if you like what you see throughout the rest of this video, I would encourage you to go to the official Kickstarter project page to find more information. I'm going to have the link at the bottom of your screen and then down in the description section of this video that will take you to the page. You can find out more information and hopefully consider backing the project. Now what is Hexed? It's a tactical, strategic, abstract game where you're actually moving pawns around a board, and so therefore you have tactical movement but also hand management, because how you're going to do that is by using and manipulating the cards that you have in hand. That's also your victory condition as well, so it's very important to keep all these different things in balance in order to strategically beat your foes. Now let's go ahead and take a brief look at how the game is played, then we're going to come back and I'll let you know what I think. Alright, I'm going to give you a brief overview of Hexed. This is a competitive game for 2 to 6 players. The goal is to line up your player pawns onto the hexes that match up to the playing cards that you have in hand. Now the first thing I need to mention here is that this is a prototype version of the game. The tiles, components, and pawns and cards that you see here may be different in the final version of the game, so please keep that in mind as we go through the rest of the overview. And also, while this will not be a completely comprehensive overview of everything that can be found in the game and all the different rules, you can go to the official Kickstarter page. The Kickstarter campaign is running right now, and you can find out more information about Hexed. Now this setup for Hex would assume a 6-player game. You have a starting hex. It says that has the logo of the game, and it says start around the edges here. It's kind of hard to see with all the pawns in the middle. And then you'll have a number of tiles connected to it equal to the number of players. So that's why this one assumes a 6-player game. So if I were to pick up one of these tiles, they all look the same. They all have the same different notations for the different playing cards that you're going to be having in hand. You have one line that actually goes off to the edge of the board, which will connect to the central tile, and then other lines will be leading out, which will connect to the other tiles surrounding it. So again, if you're playing with less players, you would actually have less tiles in play. So at the start of the game, each player is going to have 3 pawns of their color in the starting hex. You actually have a 4th pawn, which you're only going to use if you choose to modify the rules and play a bit of a longer, more complex game by having each player have an extra pawn. Then you would have that out in the center as well. Now, at the start of the game, in addition to the pawns and the tile setup, each player is going to start off with 3 playing cards. These are traditional playing cards. You'll have 2 decks of them. You'll shuffle them up and make them into 2 draw piles for people to draw cards from. And on your turn, you're going to draw a card and then play a card. Draw a card, play a card. That's all that you do on your turn. Now, the card that you play determines what you actually do. So if you play one of the cards that depicts an ace through a 10, then very simply you're going to take one of the pawns, and it doesn't matter whose pawn, yours or your opponent's, and move it that number of spaces. An ace counts as 1. So if I played an ace, you'd move 1 space. If I played anything else, you'd move that number of spaces. So let's say that I played the 6 here. Not really paying attention to the suit of the card, just the number on it, and I just want to move my pawn. So in that case, I would move it that many hexes. Hexes being either the small black hexes here or the larger purple hexes that have the number or the letter in it indicating the different types of cards. So if I went 6, I could go in any direction from the starting hex. I choose to go this way because it's easier for me to do that. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Now, there is a rhyme and reason as to where you want to move and how you want to move. What you're trying to do, like I briefly mentioned at the beginning of this overview, is you want to match up. You're always going to have 4 cards in hand at the start of your turn after you get done drawing, but then you'll have 3 remaining. And if at any time one player has matched up all 3 of their pawns to the remaining 3 cards that they have in hand, so let's say that I had a 7, a 9, and a 5 in hand, and I actually managed to have my pawns on the 7, 9, and 5, no matter where they are, no matter what tile I'm on. Let's see. Like, let's say that I had managed to put my pawn strategically in those positions. Remember, all the other players are trying to do this at the same time. I reveal my hand. Hey, look at that. I got 7, 9, and 5. I win the game right then and there immediately. So that is the goal of the game. That's what you're trying to do, is move around strategically in order to do so. Now, you can also move your opponent's pawns depending on which cards that you played. So you're also trying to prevent them from doing that, keeping them as far from their goals as possible, although you don't know what's in their hands. You can only guess as to what they've been moving towards. And like I said, different cards will do different things. So for instance, the jack is going to let you move an opponent's pawn 5 hexes. So no matter which jack it is, it's going to let you move that 5. A queen is going to let you move one of or more of your pawns a total of 5 hexes. So you can pick multiple pawns and move them that way. Basically, I could go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. The king will let you move one of your pawns anywhere from 1 to 5 spaces. More or less, it's up to you. And finally, there are jokers in the deck, and the jokers, when you play them, nobody's pawns get moved, but instead, everyone's cards, their hand of cards, are passed to the right. So everyone has to pass all their cards around. And that's really it. You're trying to strategically play your cards in order to move yours or your opponent's pawns around, trying to match them up to the cards that you still have in hand. There are different modifications you can do to the rules. You'll have less tiles with less players, and you can even set tiles up in different ways if you have less players in order to have different setups. And you can even play with an extra pawn and therefore need an extra card if you want a longer, more strategic game. That is Hexed. Let's go ahead and get to my final thoughts. Now, Hex is immediately going to appeal to fans of abstract games. So a couple of the major hallmarks of abstract games are here on display. You have the mitigation of luck. There is luck of cards coming out of the deck, but you can mitigate that in a lot of different ways. But also moving pawns strategically around the board. But it adds on to those simple concepts by having, first off, the idea that you are manipulating your pawns and your opponent's pawns, depending on the card that you play, through the cards and through hand management. I've seen this in a couple of other games, but never quite in as big and grandiose a way as you see here in Hexed. And that idea of being able to, while you're hoping that you have the right cards coming out of the deck, being able to manipulate not just your pawns, but your opponents as well, adds a lot of depth and strategy to the game. There's also the special cards like the Jack, King, Queen, and the Joker, which are going to let you move pawns in drastically different ways or in just subtle ways, depending on what you really need in order to win and how you're trying to position yourself. The Joker, while it may sound kind of chaotic, if you don't like the other cards that you have in hand, that is a way for you to get a brand new hand, maybe put you into a better position, but also to trip up your opponents who may have been working towards a particular goal. Now you've set them back a bit. But despite all this, the game is actually relatively quick. Not too quick. You still have time to get into the depth and the strategy of the game as you manipulate your pawns. You're still building up towards what your goals are, but also it doesn't outstay its welcome. And you'll have it done and have a complete and satisfying game and be ready for the next one. There's a lot of variability in how you can set up the board and the tiles, not just depending on the number of players, but just depending on how you and the other players want to set up the game. If you want to have a longer game, you can play with the extra pawn and therefore have extra cards as well. It's all up to you. So while it may seem simple on the outset, there is a hidden depth of strategy there and how other players can interact with that and manipulate it to their taste. And if this is something that's going to appeal to you, if you're a fan of abstract games that have just a little something more, then I would encourage you to go to the official Kickstarter page for Hex. I'm going to have a link at the bottom of the screen, and then down in the description section of this video, that will take you to the official page. You can find out even more information and hopefully consider backing the project. That is Hex from Machow Designs. My name is Nick, this has been Board Game Brawl, and I'm reminding you to get out there and game every day and in every way. Take care.
Thanks for watching. Follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Patreon. And make sure to check out our sponsor, Board Game Bliss, where you can find an amazing selection of games from around the world. BoardGameBliss.com. Thanks for your support.